Because, right after you do something like this, you really can't, immediately bring everything up. But I think the most important thing was bringing up the difference as far as the fiscal situation and the policies and programs that he supported up there in Washington, D.C., and the things that I don't want to support. And I think that I was able to talk about, statistics and facts, and also bring up the fact that we have had times when, Republicans and Democrats work together, like I said, Bill Clinton, as well as with Newt Gingrich, Ronald Reagan, with Tip O'Neill. We have had those instances, but people worked on the principles that are best for the United States of America.
Can you work with Democrats if you go to Washington?
Well, this is the thing that I'm concerned about. Liberal progressives, as we see them right now, I don't think it'll be very easy for me to work with them because their philosophy of governance, their principles are totally different from what I stand for. But I think that we have to get up there, get people up there that will stand on those principles. And even you've got people within the Republican Party. I mean, you look at what happened with the gentleman up in that was running for Senate in Delaware, Murkowski, Snow and Collins in Maine. I mean, there are some folks that are Republicans that aren't standing for the same principles that I believe in. You got Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's a governor out there in California. Look at the economic situation that state is in. So I think it's very important. It's not so much party anymore, ladies and gentlemen. I think that the principles of governance are now starting to take hold. Liberal progressive versus a conservative individual rights and freedom and free market enterprise oriented philosophy.
And you think? I'm sorry. Go ahead. And you think that can work? I guess in terms of
absolutely. Absolutely, because as I said, I mean, Bill Clinton, after the midterm elections, he came back to the Senate. He understood tax cuts and reduce the growth of government. And guess what we got? We got a surplus. So that's where principles of governance came together, and we've got to get that reestablished.
Can you explain? Congressman Klein brought up the fair tax a couple times in some of the statements you made, and I saw just a quick glance. You several times talked about the flat tax being kind of a bridge towards a fair tax.
Absolutely. I think that if people want to talk about a long-term fair tax, which is pre-1916, you can get there. But the thing that's so important is that first and foremost, we can institute a flat tax pretty easily. If you're talking about bringing about a consumption tax, a fair tax, that means a lot of things have to change. You got to get rid of the 16th Amendment. You got to get rid of the IRS. You got to make sure there's no other forms of taxation out there, and that's what I have been talking about. So just taking the soundbite and saying that he promotes a fair tax, that's not appropriate. I think that the flat tax can be a bridging mechanism to get to that if we want to have it as a long-term goal.
So ideally, you think that should be a long-term goal of consumption
Well,
tax?
I mean, it would be the most fair to the American people, and I think there's some tweaks that we have to make sure that occur with that, because it would be based upon what people are going out and buying. But my concern is that right now you have a debt commission that may come back and say we need a value-added tax on top of all the other taxation that we have already, and that is reprehensible.
Just to follow up on what George asked, is that what you favor in the long-term ideal?
No, I really do like a flat tax. But, I mean, there are some big proponents out there of a fair tax. I understand it. I don't think that we can go from the progressive tax system we're in right now directly to a fair tax. That's my difference, if that is what the American people want. I think most importantly, though, the progressive tax system that we have lends itself to class warfare, so that you do have 47% of Americans that aren't participating in the income tax, but yet they're able to vote for their own free entitlements. And that's a very dangerous precedent to establish.
And just so we're clear, a flat tax is what? I think you said 10 to 13%?
Yeah, I'm looking at 10 to 13% personal income, and then corporate business being 16 to 17%, somewhere in there.
Mr. Rez,
just one other thing on the fair tax. He was using the figure 23%. Is there?
Yeah, if you read the books put out there, Neil Boortz and some others, I mean, that's where they set it at, 23%. And so, I mean, I have not sat down and to figure out, is that the right percentage level? I mean, that's something that I would have to do, if all goes well in 3 weeks. I'll look at that.
But that's, to be clear though, I mean, you're only advocating that, if you can get rid of all these other forms of taxation?
You got to get rid of all other forms of taxation. You cannot have a fair tax if you have any other forms of taxation out there at a national level, because then you will kill people. You will drive them, into the ground.
And what about states that have sales taxes, things like that?
Well, remember what we're just talking about at the federal level.
Right.
So we're not talking about the states. I mean, the states have the 10th Amendment. If the states want to continue to have a sales tax, that is up to the states. I mean, so that's something that we have to look at. And that's why, like I said, I really think that a flat tax is the best way to go for us in this country.
in terms of how to deal with terrorism, do you believe in methods such as the waterboarding?
Well, you know, this is one thing we have to look at. You know, when you go through SEER training, escape, evasion, rescue, and what is the SEER? I forget what the last E is. We use waterboarding on our own individuals going through training. And as a matter of fact, you go back and look at the movie G.I. Jane. I mean, they use waterboarding on her. This is the most important thing that we have to realize and understand. I don't want to see another terrorist attack in the United States of America. And I think whatever things that we can do within the reason of law, within the reason of human rights and dignity, we need to make sure that Americans are safe. Because last week, I believe, the Times Square bomber made a very definitive statement when he said, my only regret was that the bomb did not go off and I could not kill Americans. And if I had to do it again, I would. And that even if you imprison me for life, it will not matter because Islam will dominate the world. We have to understand that there's a very vile and vicious enemy out there that has been at this against Western civilization since the 7th century, and we have to face that enemy.
Happy with how you did in the debate today?
Well, we'll see what you guys write up. I think that I was able to hold my own. I think that I was able to bring out the critical differences between the two, and like I said, I talked about the contrast, and we'll just see where we go from here. But the most important thing is what happens 3 weeks from today. So no matter what I did today, the truth in telling, the most important poll is the poll that will come out on the evening of the 2nd of November, and that's what I'm focused on. And as they teach you when you run track, you run through the tape. That's the most important thing.
There were several questions about your comportment and some of the statements you made at other Tea Party rallies. Do you get tired of?
What you all have to understand. I was in the military. I had drill sergeants that said some very nasty things about me. So I'm not concerned about all of this back and forth that's going on. But the most important thing is I do get upset when people do things that put my family at risk. Now that is unacceptable.
What is your stance regarding to the building of the New York City mosque?
I do not think that mosque should be built at ground zero. I think that when you understand what Cordoba means, you go back and read history in 7/11. I think if you also understand what the Hagia Sophia, what that represents, and also what happened with the Dome of the Rock being placed over Solomon's Temple. And that's an important thing we have to understand. History has a means of repeating itself if you don't adhere to it and study it. And so, all things have cycles. And we are seeing another cycle. This would be a victory obelisk. And all you have to do is read the Quran, read the Hadiths, understand the Surah, and you can understand the ideology that we're up against.
And so you're that concerned about the direction of the country at this point?
I'm concerned that we are taking a belief that I frame it in this terms. When tolerance becomes a one-way street, it leads to cultural suicide. And, the great thing about America, we want people to come here. We want people to be a part of our American dream. But you also need to respect our traditions, our culture, and our values. And if we continue to give those away and give ground, I'm really worried about the future and legacy of our country.
Thank you.